it's like we're going to get another PowerPoint connected, I hope. So while they're doing whatever they're doing, let me tell you how I got started in this. I came to this issue a lot like Allison did, and that is, I understood this issue. My understanding was pretty consistent with the American media reporting on this issue. So I saw this issue mostly as a tit-for-tat battle among almost equals. When I thought of a Palestinian, the next thought in my head was terrorist. And that was the framing at the time. And I considered myself fairly well informed. It was my youngest daughter who was attending the University of Utah, and she happened to really enjoy internationals. And so we were frequently entertaining kids from Sri Lanka or Japan or the Ivory Coast. And one day she asked me if she could bring some Palestinians to our home. And I said no. I was bothered. And she said to me, "Mom, you're wrong about this, and you need to meet these kids and hear their story." And it wasn't so much that I cared about Palestinians as that I cared about my daughter. And I could see that I was going to alienate my daughter if I didn't say yes. And so we had these Palestinians in our home, and it was one of the better experiences of our life. It was a very enriching experience. They were wonderful, bright, friendly, politically savvy kids. They spent Thanksgiving with us, Christmas with us. We went camping with them, fishing with them. And as you might expect with Palestinians, we had hundreds of cups of tea. So it was a wonderful experience. They tell me the PowerPoint is copying. So anyway, as I listened to these kids' stories, I was particularly disturbed by the discrepancy between what they were telling me and what I had understood. And in particular, what would bother me is I might say, how's your family this week? And they would say, they're okay, but Israel turned the electricity and the water off. And that wasn't consistent with anything. It didn't make sense to me. It wasn't consistent with anything I had in my head about the only democracy in the Middle East. And as I got to know them, they shared more and more stories. One young man talked about how he had spent 3 years in an Israeli prison and had never, ever been charged with any crime. And I couldn't, that didn't compute for me. I couldn't imagine anybody being in prison and never having a crime, being charged with a crime. So that really got me interested and concerned. But I probably would have stopped there had it not been for 9/11. I met these kids in about 1993, and as I said, they were an important part of my life for a number of years. But things probably would have ended there if it hadn't been for 9/11. And 9/11 was not as an astounding experience for me as I think it was for others. I had a very strong sense of how angry the people of the Middle East were over the situation there. I had an understanding that it had been festering then for about 100 years, 120 years. I had a little bit of a sense of Zionism, and I knew that sometime there would be something happening. I didn't know it was going to be 9/11, but I certainly felt that something. So I didn't see 9/11 as out of the blue and just evil people that hate us. But anyway, as I sat and watched those buildings come down, I thought, why haven't I been working on this already? What have I been waiting for? Why haven't I been speaking up? And so that was really my decision to get busy on this issue. and most of you probably know, I would, along with some others in Utah, founded the group Utahns for Just Peace in the Holy Land. Our primary mission is simply to try to bring the story to educate Utahns about this issue. I think it's a critical issue. I think that it's not just critical from a human rights perspective, from the perspective of caring about other people, but it's important from the perspective of caring about us and about what sort of world we're creating, what sort of world we're in the process of creating when we support what's going on over there. Allison has talked a great deal about what isn't in the media, and I think the connection between the alienation of the entire Middle East, the increase in fundamentalism in the world. We have seen very little about the connection between that and the Palestine issue. And yet it is available to us, and our government does know. The 9/11 Commission hearings, it came out in the 9/11 Commission hearings, it came out in the Iraq Study Group hearings, the UN commissioned a study called the Alliance of Civilizations, in which they were trying to address why this increase in fundamentalism, in terrorism, and all of those studies cited the Israel-Palestine issue as at the heart of the problem. And yet, I think it's almost unknown in the U.S. So I'm guessing that most of the audience here is pretty familiar with the Middle East and probably don't have to have this map. But I never know, so I've got it. I just remind people of Israel and point out that Israel proper is the yellow area and the sort of brown, tan, West Bank and Gaza. That's what we're talking about when we say the occupied Palestinian territories. They are not the same. The occupied Palestinian territories, a lot of people think it's all Israel. It isn't. And if you doubt it, I would suggest you go to our CIA website. It will confirm for you that the occupied Palestinian territories are not Israel. They are occupied Palestinian territory. So I want to start by talking about a study that the Human Sciences Research Council of Africa, South Africa, completed about 6 months ago. They took a look at Israeli practices in the occupied Palestinian territories and looked at those practices against international law regarding apartheid, and came with the conclusion that the situation is apartheid. It has reached the level of apartheid. And I really think you cannot understand a situation unless you have a basic understanding of apartheid and how it operates. So apartheid regimes, apartheid governments, depend on 3 pillars to hold apartheid in place. And first is that the state establishes laws which codify a preferred identity, and then establish additional laws that grant preferential legal status and material privileges to the preferred group, while discriminating against the non-preferred group.